Hello, kia ora, g'day. I'm Philip Duncan from Weather Watch TV on YouTube with your Australia-only forecast through until Sunday. And we've got a few moving parts at the moment. In fact, 4 of them. Number 1, the tropical downpours and even the risk of a tropical cyclone north of Darwin this week. Number 2, low pressure around Western Australia, encouraging showers from central areas to the southwest and even tracking along further to South Australia. The 3rd feature, autumn arriving in the southeast. You could even argue a bit of taste of winter with snow on the tops of Tasmania and a windy, showery sou'wester coming through Bass Strait, coastal parts of Victoria in that. The 4th and largest system of all, the big dry high pressure zone, encouraging dry weather and southerlies for South Australia, a large part of Queensland, pretty much all of New South Wales and the ACT, and a decent chunk of Victoria, although as I say, cloud and showers are pushing through some of those southern areas. So a few moving parts. Temperature-wise, look at this. This is the Misery Index. It's designed for livestock. So where you see red, 30 degrees and above, where you see blue, and there's a small bit of it here in Tasmania for later on at the end of today, that is showing temperatures 0 and below. All the shading in black is temperate. It's what we would consider normal, not hot, not really cold. So we are seeing a large southerly flow coming into the eastern half of Australia. Temperatures are not as hot at the moment around South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, even going into Queensland. Then you get the heat at the top where it's expected. And look, even some parts here in the yellow, that's the highest on the Misery Index. Yellow means basically temperatures 40 degrees and above. So that's not too out of the ordinary for the northwest corner there. But that's the reason why you've got that heat, that northerly being pulled down over Western Australia. But to me, the dark shading and the temperatures that are normal at the moment, that is the news story coming out of this high pressure belt coming on through. So the high moves on across to the east on Tuesday, centered pretty much between Adelaide and Melbourne. It's sort of in this area here, moving into Bass Strait. Now for Tasmania, that means that the winds twist from being a sou'wester where it's cold to a westerly, which is warmer, dry for those eastern and more populated areas. And as those winds curve around the high, they come back in as a bit of an easterly for anywhere from Sydney northwards up past Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast, getting that east to southeasterly wind and a few showers off the Tasman or the Coral Sea. Won't be very much. In the tropics, we've got a few downpours, not a lot really going on, but that low to the north of the Northern Territory, that is the one expected to form into a tropical cyclone this week. Further down into Western Australia, the usual thunderstorms in the Kimberley, Pilbara areas, and then you drop down into this low pressure zone, sort of west of Kalgoorlie, between there and Albany. That's producing a few more showers, nothing too substantial, although there could be a few thunderstorms in that sort of brighter line there. Let's go into Wednesday. So north of Darwin, there is the tropical low. That is deepening further on Wednesday. Could deepen quite rapidly, drifting from east to west, so it's heading towards the Timor Sea. Speaking of easterlies, we've got those blowing really from parts of Queensland and New South Wales across the continent. They get messier as they move through because of that low pressure zone moving into South Australia from West Australia. Western Australia, it's not a very big low. It's very, very weak. So I'm sorry, it's not going to produce rain for those of you who really want it in large parts of South Australia. Also drying out a lot further down into the southeast here, although transitioning between highs. The first high out over the Tasman Sea, the second high in the Indian Ocean. The only other area of interest, a bit of heavy rain, Grafton to Port Macquarie. You might see sort of isolated heavier falls as that rain showers build up against the hills, pushed in by that easterly. And on Thursday, again, eastern coastal areas seeing showers, but once you're into the hills, over the top of the divide, you're not getting much, pretty much nothing at all. Dry weather pushing right across to the western side of Australia, caught up in that easterly flow. Tropical downpours affect the far north of Queensland, and I really mean the far north. And then you've got the cyclone here, possibly coming in to East Timor. So this is one to monitor for parts of Timor, obviously Indonesia, seeing that storm tracking east to west and moving closer to them than it is to Australia. So there's not really a lot to talk about in Australia on Thursday outside of that. By Friday, the cyclone may well be making landfall there. So that's not locked in yet, but it does look like a big rain and wind event for Timor. Further down into Queensland, far north Queensland, coming right down past Cairns, you are seeing heavy rain, probably from about Tully northwards. Those downpours carrying on, thunderstorms in the mix. South of there though, certainly from Townsville southwards, Those showers are a lot more hit and miss as far as a decent one that's going to produce rain. Not everyone wants that, especially around Brisbane and the Northern Rivers area. Showers there look fairly isolated, as they do the further down the country you go. Let's have a closer look at the cyclone potential on Friday. So it's going into West Timor by the looks of it. So Dili up here in East Timor, outside the worst of it based on this modelling. Heavy rain though. This is just 24 hours of rain, and the blue you're seeing here well over 200-300 millimetres. So certainly a rain event. And then it comes in there to West Timor. Places like Kupang could well be in the firing line. 500,000 people living just in the city, let alone outside of it. So keeping a close eye on that at the end of Friday. As far as Australia is concerned, you know, Darwin's way over here. So it is a long way offshore from Darwin at this stage. Going into the weekend, so the cyclone appears to be dropping away from Indonesia, now moving back out to sea, where it might reform and sort of re-strengthen, but it's no threat to Australia at this stage. And in fact, all the long-range modelling suggests it remains offshore, but it is close enough to keep an eye on. The main rain event though here is actually over towards Cairns, and once again sort of tully northwards, seeing that heavier rain coming through. Some spots around Cairns up to Port Douglas could be seeing 200 or 300 millimetres falling in just a day. So that's your kind of tropical rain burst right there. Down the rest of the east coast, the usual showers, but again around Brisbane to Grafton, some heavier falls coming through there, just sort of lining up and building up against the hills and ranges. But once again, the further down the country you go, the drier it gets. Dry for South Australia, dry for Victoria, and mostly dry for Tasmania. You might get a little shower in the northeast. I know you want more rain in the northeast. That's not going to deliver very much. We've also got another area of low pressure around the southern half of Western Australia, bringing a little bit more life in the rain there for the southwest corner. And our final map for Sunday shows another big high moving into the southwest, but between that and that low pressure zone, in fact a couple of them here, that could drive in a line of convergence where the clouds build up. You get some really heavy rain from Kalgoorlie down to about Esperance, seeing some really heavy rain on Sunday based on the modelling here. Not much for Perth, not much for Bunbury, not much for Geraldton or further northwards there. On the eastern side, heaviest rain from Mackay, northwards up to about Port Douglas. Cairns right in the middle of that, getting some heavy falls coming through. And again, around Brisbane, Northern Rivers area, seeing some of those heavier falls. But once you're into the Sydney southwards area, it is not so wet, in fact, looking mostly dry. And after the southerlies you've got today, now those are north to northwesterlies coming back in. So as we go into the weekend, those temperatures are going up for those of you in the southeast who have just experienced that big temperature drop. So there we go, a few moving parts on the map at the moment. One more thing, we'll go here just to have a closer look on Sunday, the cyclone that could be offshore from Broome. So this isn't locked in, but that's a serious storm to be keeping an eye on, but it's a decent distance away offshore for it to not be a threat, not at this stage, but we will be keeping a very close eye on the developments of that cyclone north of Australia expected this week. That's all from me. We'll see you again on Thursday with our 7-day rainfall update for Australia. Have a great week ahead.